Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson. And in today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Renee Wellenstein, who is an amazing libido-ologist. That's right, you heard me. She's a double board certified physician whose personal experience with burnout has led her to step outside of the conventional medicine box to empower the women she works with to take control of their health, jumpstart their energy, improve their confidence, and reignite their libido. You may be surprised to hear how the same factors affect autoimmunity as well as libido. I promise we'll connect those dots. Dr. Renee shares with us her ABCs of burnout and gives us actionable steps we can take to bring self-care into our lives to improve our health as well as our quality of life. Dr. Renee, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So one of the first questions I usually ask my guests, because most of us in this wellness space have our own stories. I know, you have a medical career and we're on a different path. So would you be willing to share a little bit about what got you into doing what you're doing now? Share your story with our listeners.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a long one. It's about 3 year in the making, actually probably longer than that. But, I'll fast forward to the pivotal point in my life, which actually right before that, which is, my husband and I had moved from a suburb of New York City. So we were living in Connecticut. I thought I was living the dream life. At that point, I was a OBGYN, again, living the dream life, although I was up every other night and, delivering those babies and at the office early. And I had infant twins at this time. They were born in 2007.
Wow.
And, in 2008, we said, oh gosh, let's move to the country. Let's move to where life is not so chaotic, because at this point, we weren't enjoying the city life. We were just enjoying working and coming home to our kids. And so we moved to the country in New York. And of course, what happens when you are the daughter of a dairy farmer who always wanted a horse, and you move to the country, which is a little more affordable to have a horse where I live, you get a horse. And number two, what do you do when you're an animal lover and you rescue animals? You rescue a horse that came off the racetrack. So I rescued a thoroughbred, and it's all a blur as far as how long I had him, but I fell off that horse and broke my back. And that's always where I say my story begins, because up until then, I was just probably, going 150 miles per hour, always living in the future, like go, 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 go. But that's the only life I'd ever known. And, thinking of how long it takes you to get your medical degree, like college and medical school and residency and all the things, like I would just kept doing, right? Going to the next school, doing the next thing. And this was the first time when I fell off the horse and broke the back that I was literally halted at, bed rest, walker, shower chair, all the things. And I also always say this is the time where I never wished back issues on anybody, but when it's your own self, you're like, okay, put me back together again. But my injury, I could not be put back together again. I was Humpty Dumpty that fell off the wall that could not be put together again. So, and I was okay with that for about 6 months, but I was 6 months out of work on narcotics for my pain. Pretty much, I don't do well with the really strong pain medicine. So I had to chase it with all the other things to ward away the side effects, like the constipation and the nausea. So I was a living medicine cabinet on a day-to-day basis, and pretty much just on the couch feeling awful. But I had a lot of time to think at this point because I've completely slowed down. But my thinking was over the next couple months, even into a year, was now in retrospect, all the grieving I was angry at my situation. I was resentful. I totally went through all the stages of grieving, envious of other people still having their life and all the things. And here I was now with a bum back. And when I did return to work, my scope of practice was limited in that I could not deliver anymore and I couldn't operate, which is really, for an OBGYN, that's the life changing part of our job. This is where we change lives, bringing a baby into the world and doing a surgery on a woman to make her feel better. Like that is where my purpose lied, not doing pap smears in the clinic all day, which is really what I had succumbed to because of this injury. And I was like, okay, well, it is what it is. At least I'm back to work. Well, then I started noticing more symptoms popping up, such as an inability to get out of bed in the morning, just really low energy and fatigued all day, pretty much living on a pot of coffee or some sort of caffeinated beverage to get me through the day. Couldn't wait till I got home and laid back on the couch, maybe took a nap, grabbing the chips as opposed to a salad for lunch because that's all I had the energy for. And, I'd get the second wind at night, which was always bizarre. At like 10, 11 o'clock, I could stay up. I was like, what is going on here? So of course it came to my rock bottom when I in bed with my husband, I said, I just can't go on living like this. I feel like a deadbeat mom, a really awful wife because I'm laying on the couch all day. I'm not doing things with my kids. At this point, they were probably 7 years old. And I just don't feel good. I don't feel like myself. And of course I had terrible mindset things going on at this point because I was gaining weight. I just felt my self-confidence, self-esteem was at an all-time low. And just the thought that I had that night with my husband that I couldn't go on living this way, like the thought that I could take my life, I didn't have a plan, but that thought, and here I had 2 kids down the hallway from me in bed. I was like, I need help. However, I knew going to my doctor what the diagnosis would be because I was in that world. I was in the conventional medical world where I laid in bed every night thinking, gosh, what could this be? Self-diagnosing. And I said, I know the box I'm going to be shoved into. Yep. And sure enough, I went to see my doctor and I was shoved into the depression box.
Yep.
And I remember saying to her, like, I knew that's what you were going to say. And she's like, well, think about it. Your life completely changed. And I said, you're right. It did. It must be depression. But I just didn't feel like this is what depression would feel like. Like I thought I would be much more emotional, like more sad, crying all the time, like sad. Right. Like I don't feel sad. I do sometimes, but not more most of the day. I said, I'm just beating myself up most of the day because of all the other things. So I went on to the antidepressant and of course it did not make my symptoms better. And as a matter of fact, I had all of the side effects. Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of the next, those 3 months where I was between visits, I was like, I don't know about this. But I continued to take it with all the side effects. And 3 months later, I went back. And of course, when you go back to your doctor and a medication is not working, it's not that you have the wrong diagnosis, you have the wrong medication. So sure enough, and again, I didn't know what else it could be. I'm racking my brain for 3 months going, what else could this be? And of course, all my blood work was quote unquote normal, and at this point I was still under really constant care with my providers. And mind you, I had already flunked out of physical therapy. They didn't really want to see me anymore because I was one of those chronic pain people. And when I was going into my second antidepressant, of course, I walked away with a different one because I'm like, okay, this one, you're right. This one has to work because that was my mentality as well.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better.
Training.
It's my training. And so, and I knew, I walked into the visits and said, okay, this didn't work. What else we have,
Yeah.
So I walked away with that one. And honestly, same exact thing happened. All of the side effects without the resolution of symptoms. And I was like, there's got to be something else going on. And I, at this point, never felt so helpless because, essentially she's like, well, if this one doesn't work, I don't know what else to do. So these are symptoms I was actually going to have to live with, and hopeless that these are symptoms I'm going to have to live with. And I'm just going to have to feel just so not good on so many levels, a mental, a physical, a emotional, a spiritual, like they were all nosediving down every day. And so I'm not sure when I got the name of a functional medicine doctor, but it happened to fall in my lap because over the course of this year that I'm going through all of this, I started selling anti-aging skincare because one of the other things is I had no purpose in my life. Like we need purpose in our life to get out of bed in the morning. And when I'm getting out of bed and going and just doing a rote pap smear, yes, I know the female patients are grateful that I'm doing a screening test for them, but I'm not changing their life. This is the whole reason. And quite frankly, I was bored. I just like, well, let me do some direct sales. Let me have some fun in my life. Let me do something that I've never done before. So ironically, this functional medicine doc was put on my radar, not for my medical needs, but because she was an anti-aging doctor who might need the skincare I was selling. So I contacted her one evening at like 9:00 at night in bed, and she got on the phone and she said, pretty much promptly, I don't need your skincare. I have my own line. However, let's talk about your health. And honestly, within, I would say 5-10 minutes of describing like what had happened to me, my symptoms, she said, I don't think you have depression. I think you have adrenal fatigue. And that's what we called it back in the day.
Sure.
And here I am in my bed, again, 9:00 at night. My husband had just gone into the bathroom to take a shower, and I'm on my computer Googling, like, what is this adrenal fatigue? And honestly, this aha moment came. I was like, oh my gosh, this is me. So two things, like, this is me. How do I make this better? But number two is like, this is real. It's not all in my head, which
Right.
a lot of women out there, I think once you don't get quote unquote fixed by that medication, you start feeling like it's all in my head. I'm crazy.
Yep.
And number three, I'm a doctor. How come I didn't know about this?
Yeah.
How come this was nowhere on my radar? Why couldn't I have fixed myself a year ago? So she kind of goes through the treatment plan. And on the heels of that, she says, well, why don't you join me in practice? And she happens to be about 3.5 hours from where I live. And she wanted to set up a practice about an hour from where I lived. And so then I'm like, what is it that you do? What do you call yourself? Functional medicine doctor. So I'm Googling that. And I was like,
I want to do that.
My purpose. I'm like, the thing that I've been looking for, I had bought all the books, Julie, of like what to do if you're a doctor, and aside from just, in a clinic or hospital practicing medicine, it was malpractice, you can lawsuits, and you could be a expert witness, and you could be, I don't know, all these things, and I was like, pharmaceuticals was on there. I'm like, these are not things that I want to do. This is not going to get me out of bed in the morning.
Might as well just keep doing pap smears at this point.
Exactly. And that's what I exactly thought. I'm like, I'm just going to keep doing pap smears until this night. And when I Googled that, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is this is like figuring out why someone feels the way they're feeling and not just slapping a medication on them. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I'm like, done. So the funniest part is my husband comes out of the bathroom. Mind you, he's been in there maybe 20, 30 minutes max. And I said, honey, great news. No, this lady doesn't want my skincare, but I have adrenal fatigue. And I'm not broken. I said, I don't have depression. And guess what? I don't need a prescription medication. I just, some supplements, major lifestyle changes, not going to get better overnight, but hey, at least I know it's not in my head. Oh, and by the way, I'm leaving the hospital and I'm going back and doing a fellowship in this functional medicine and joining this woman I just met on the phone in practice. And he literally stands there. His mouth is like on the floor. He goes, how long was I in the shower for? And honestly, this is the first time that I actually listened to my gut. Like as docs, we are so conditioned to listen to our head and like, just don't even take the body and how you feel into it. Just like all head.
Yes.
And this was literally the first time of all of those years that I had been suppressing that gut feeling of like even when I had the depression diagnosis, this doesn't feel right. It wasn't right, but I didn't know what else it was. Right. So here's the first time that I was like, this is the next right thing. This is my purpose. I have a diagnosis. This is my healing. This is how I'm going to give hope and help to those women out there that feel exactly how I have felt. So I did exactly that. I went back, finished out my time as an OB at the hospital while doing this fellowship and completed the fellowship, joined this woman in practice for 4 years. We had to ultimately close the practice, probably 3 years ago now for financial purposes. Just sometimes those kind of practices don't thrive in certain areas of the country.
Sure.
And I'm still doing what I'm doing now online 100%. And so, and still never regretting the fact I'm still a board certified OBGYN. I will never give that up. I love women's health. I just come at it from a different perspective now, which is exactly how I say root cause medicine. I try to figure out, okay, let's not slap a medication on it. Let's try to figure out why you're feeling the way you're feeling.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that journey. There's so many parts and pieces. I'm sure listeners are just like me, like, oh yeah, I, you know, I can relate to that. And I can, you commented about how we tend to start to question, like, is it in my head? Am I crazy? Especially when labs are clean and the medications aren't working. But I've encountered, as I'm sure you have, so many people that it's not even that they wonder if they're crazy. Pretty much their doctors are saying it must be in your head because, and I remember at one point in my journey with rheumatoid arthritis, talking to my best friend and saying, I wonder if I have depression. And I was already diagnosed. I was also on a cabinet full of medications, 10 prescriptions. And I was exhausted, all the things because the medications weren't helping my symptoms. And so I was going down the list of, I have all of these things that could be depression. And she said to me, but do you feel like you're depressed? Do you feel like, when you said that, like, even though your head was saying like, yeah, it must be, and there's a med for that, like, you just knew, because I run through that checklist of not in my head, but in my heart myself when I was so sick. And so often that is one of the things, no matter what other illness people are struggling with, they're also given that antidepressant because it's like, be quiet, like just, and again, it's not, I always say this to people, doctors don't go into medicine to not help people. Like, you're limited by your training, as you are case in point of, as you're saying, even for myself, I couldn't figure it out. And so, but this is what makes the most passionate functional medicine providers is, that you talk about this is your purpose. And you even knew when you lost your purpose there for a while that was important. You had to find one, you had to make one, you had to search for one. And I think like, oh, what a gift for all those women that work with you now that, they're getting to that root cause, they're getting their answers. And I know your work has taken you in some really important directions. And I always promise listeners we'll try to keep this to about a half hour. Yeah. And so you and I know, like we could talk about a million things.
Which we already have done.
We have. You guys are all welcome. We got a lot of it out. I want to talk about so many things, but I want to talk about chronic stress and burnout. I think it ties so beautifully into your story as well, because even though you may not use the term adrenal fatigue, I say, adrenal challenges, burnout, or however you want to put it. I think, especially in the times we're living in, even more so than before, but women in general have a tendency to push themselves beyond. And so I want to kind of dig in. I'll let you pick up. I just threw out like 5 different things within that whole chronic stress mindset, burnout realm, because whether it's autoimmunity, or I know you do a lot of work around libido as a symptom. So many women that consider themselves healthy struggle with, that have no or low libido, young women, older women, doesn't matter. And so I think any woman listening will get so much value out of connecting those dots. I always say, you and I have said before, the things that need to be addressed for full health serve pretty much, whether it's autoimmunity, whether you name it, it's that umbrella of whole health. So let's talk about how important I think you called it unsexy when we were talking before we turned on the mic. But I think we need to make it sexy. We need to really get people to understand how things like mindset and stress and purpose are driving health or illness.
Yeah. Yeah. I love using the word burnout as well, because I say adrenal fatigue because that's fallen out of favor in our world as far as
Yeah.
it was never an official diagnosis, but I think it actually describes the condition perfectly, because when you think of the adrenal glands, they're the little glands on top of our kidneys, they're little powerhouses that produce our stress hormones. And they, after a while, can get fatigued. They can get tired because they're working so hard. And in retrospect, I was, leading up to my story, like I was living that dream life, but up every other night. And when I wasn't up with someone else's baby, I was up with my babies and, 24/7, go, 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 and just living outside of a city. Again, that's a whole nother can of worms that I opened up when I moved down there. And it's, I didn't realize the level of stress that I was having every single day because I was in it and going 150 miles an hour until I literally was knocked off that horse. And, it's so funny. I always say, I don't think I hit my head, but something happened to me when I fell off that horse, like mindset wise, like a total shift. And also the fact that I had to physically slow down. And, so that was my breaking point for women with burnout. Again, classically adrenal fatigue. I call it a lot of times adrenal dysfunction, HPA dysfunction, like there's a lot of names for it, but let's call it burnout, because I think a lot of people can understand the word burnout, right? And, all my classic symptoms I have were that burnout, like
right out of the books.
Out of the book.
Yeah.
And including, my second wind at night was a particular stage of burnout. But, and I think a lot of the things that contribute to burnout have really been put to the forefront of our care. And we were talking about this, Julie, before you started recording, of like how we take care of clients now, because in the past, and if you go to your regular doctor, of course, they're going to say, okay, you're stressed. Okay. Stress management, reduce your stress. Okay. How, right? Like, what do I do, doc? Like, I don't know, go, meditate,
Right.
Yeah. So I love meditation. Yeah. That is not feasible for a lot of people to, that was like crazy for me to think of back in the day. I'm like, okay, meditate. Okay. Yeah. Right. Where do I have time to do that? So we need to, for the burnout and the number of women that have actually are experiencing burnout, contributing. And a lot of the things, not only the hormonal imbalances that can occur from burnout, but a lot, like in my story, a lot of the lifestyle changes that we take on because of that, the convenient foods, me opening up the bag of chips, not sleeping necessarily well, obviously not hydrating, probably too much alcohol, all of this to de-stress, like all of these things are leading to not only the low libido I talk a lot about, but also autoimmune conditions because of gut dysfunction. Right. So like, it is really, so it's like this thing that starts with this chronic stress that we're not identifying, leading to these lifestyle changes that lead to all these other issues. Right. And that's where we're at right now in our world. And we're sort of at this stage where everyone's running to their doctor with stress. Okay. If actually your doctor will do two things, actually tell you to de-stress and give you a medication probably for it. Because as docs, we are in the helping field and we have 5 minutes to do it. And I can say that because it used to be me, and I never felt like I was helping someone unless you walked out of my office with a prescription in her hand. Even a 5-minute visit, I felt better because you had that prescription in your hand. That's how we're trained. So unless we can give that medication, you don't always feel like we did anything. But I really love to talk about it from a very practical, approach of like what everyone can do, because I know probably there's a lot of women out there in your audience that are like, yeah, I feel fatigued in the morning. Even after I sleep all night, I still don't feel like I can get out of bed. I want to hit snooze 50 times. I'm turning to the coffee all day. I'm hitting that lull in the afternoon for, another couple cups of coffee, living on the sugar, really know what healthy choices I should make. We don't should ourselves
to make them.
I don't have the energy to make them. That was me. I was closing the fridge after I saw the salad mix in there, and I turned to the cabinet and got the bag of chips and went back on the couch and ate because I was so tired. And so a lot of those, again, some of your listeners are like, yeah, that's me. That's totally me. Like maybe you're gaining the weight, you're not feeling very confident and your self-esteem has taken a nosedive. All these things actually will, then we talk about eating healthy. You're like, yeah, whatever. Give me the energy and I'll eat healthy. So I always talk about the ABCs, which are tips that anyone can do, and it's so interesting. After I started talking about the A, which is awareness, I now hear it all over because it goes into the mindset work everywhere, that you can't take action on anything in your life unless you're aware of what you're currently doing. And that goes with stress. Like, what is stressing you out? Like, there are so many people, and this used to be me, running around going, I'm stressed about what? Like, what is it?
Right.
And, of course, I did a recent masterclass, and I did a survey, and, the most common are like work-life balance, finances, health, kiddos because of the pandemic, marriage was huge on the list, parents, aging parents, their weight, career choices. So like there is I've covered just so many that, again, your listeners are probably like, yep. But what is it? What practically can you take action on right away to start? Because it's not going to get better unless we do something about it, or at least first identify it. And then, okay, what can we do about it? I always approach it with a SMART goals, specific, measurable. Anyhow, don't get into the SMART goals, but like something that yeah, like what can you do? Like we can't, and I'd love to get to the end point of like all the supplements someone can take and but let's come back to like, okay, what is it? And it's not taking all your stress and dealing with it in 24 hours, like one thing at a time. And the things that you can kind of knock out pretty much right away, you hate your job. Well, can't go find another one necessarily tomorrow. So like, and I have to say stress, feeling trapped in a job is probably one of the worst, or a relationship, two of the biggest stressors,
it's the feeling trapped part.
Yeah. They did this awful study on mice, and like they cut off some of their appendages. Oh, I know. Or they trapped them in a corner. And actually the mice were more stressed when they were trapped as opposed to getting an appendage cut off. Like that goes to show you, like, even as humans, like you can feel, oh yes, I hate my job. But when you say that, like you're feeling trapped in that job because obviously you need it for money. And that's a huge stressor you're not even aware of. Yes, you're aware that you don't like your job, but like it goes much deeper than that. So if that's the case, and it's something that you can start taking, steps towards getting a different job or like a second income to try to like, maybe you can cut down something, but everything is figure outable, right? Like you can do it. It may not be overnight that you can leave your job, but like start working on it. Like, this life is short. We got to wake up loving what we do. Like my life for 3 years there, I didn't love waking up in the morning because I lack that purpose. And there are so many people out there right now that are feeling the same exact way. So awareness. Number two.
I love what you just said about it. I'm going back to the feeling trapped because I could feel like the relief. It may take a year to take whatever steps you need to take to get that new job, but really you start to feel that relief with that first step. Like as soon as you're taking action, no, you haven't changed or eliminated your stressor, but you've changed your stress response because you are now in action and not feeling so trapped. So sorry, I just had to.
No. Yeah. And there's some other little stressors.
Yeah.
I mean, even relationships, another, a big one that I commented on. And of course, I'm not going to tell you to go get a divorce tomorrow, but maybe it brings light to the fact that I'm not in a happy relationship or I feel trapped. Why do I feel trapped? Well, we're just not doing the C, which is coming up, but like, what is it in your relationship that you want to improve? And is your partner amicable to improving it? Communication, which is the C that's coming up, like talking about it. Obviously if it's an abusive relationship and such, that's a different story, but a lot of times I'm seeing out there, these relationships that are withering away and they feel trapped, but we're not saying exactly what we need in our relationship. So, there you go. Like say, okay, I feel trapped. I'm not happy. Why? Well, because we're not talking or we're fighting a lot. Well, what can we do about that? And then, again, talking to your partner. So, and those are the big ones, but there's a lot of other little ones that I'm sure, like when you start writing down, like, well, I'm stressed about who's doing the dishes tonight, like, okay, you've got a kid, there you go, so, and there's one stressor gone, or grocery shopping, so like, oh, can you send your hubby at the grocery store on the way home? Just send him the list, so, and I'm going to get to that with what's coming up because they all kind of go together. My B is always boundaries. B and C kind of go together. B is boundaries, C is communication. And I think over the past 18 plus months now, a lot of things have happened. We've added so much more to our to-do list. We as women have, and I'm not to say men don't have a big to-do list, but I feel like we have taken on a lot more as our stereotypical roles in the house of like taking care of the kids and the dishes and the grocery shopping and all the things, but potentially maybe adding on extra income because the family needed it, or having to relocate your business to home, or maybe even losing your job, which is, again, there goes purpose, right? But a lot other, what was that?
Homeschooling.
Homeschooling,
That's
a
big ad for a lot of women the past year and a half.
Well, and that's the thing, all day when they would be working, they would be, virtually. I was always grateful that my kids were older, they were 13 going through this, that I didn't have to sit there and watch them. But the ones that were doing it with these little ones, I was like, oh my goodness. So essentially, and then school starts, maybe they're like go for their job between 3 and 5, and then they had to do dinner and grocery shop and all of the things. It's like, and so their to-do list is never ending. And they're not saying no. Right. I feel like for a period of time there, we all felt like life got a lot less chaotic because we weren't going to all these unnecessary places. But I feel like we had it on a lot of other things. So again, saying no, really on your to-do list, try to limit it. And this is where my 4Ds come in.
Yes.
My do, delegate, delay, and delete. So if you have many women have a laundry list of things, you wake up in the morning, you have a to-do list of 10 things in that list. Because ideally, I'd like you to have 3, right? Because one of the biggest thing for women at the end of the day, huge feeling of failure or what have you when you fall into bed, is that you didn't get those 10 things done.
Right.
You couldn't get those 10 things done. That was me too. Like I would put on way too much on my list. I can't get it all done. It's not feasible. There's not enough hours in one day for me to get it done, maybe a week. But overachiever, here I come. I'm going to get those 10 things done. And then I fall into bed going, oh, I got 3 things done. So ideally, 3 things, put on your top of your to-do list, a thing that you have to get done, that eat that frog kind of thing, get it done first. But when you're going down your list, think, okay, what do I absolutely have to do? Not what do I think I do the best? What do you have to do?
Right.
What can you delegate? So for instance, when I was saying with the groceries, can you ask your partner if can you pick up the groceries on the way home? Or can you make the dinner so I can get this done? Or the kids, can you unload the dishwasher? Can you do the dishes? Can you bring your lunch boxes in and clean them out? That's a real life example right there for me.
It takes intention. I think it's not automatic for most women to consider, where can I delegate? It takes training, and it's such an important step. And it is amazing how much of those little stressors one can eliminate if they do delegate.
Yeah. And little things like I was the ones that I have to do it all. I can do as good, better than anyone. And I have to do it all. And I found that no, you can do it just as good as me. And, with the kiddos, yes, it does take a little bit of repetition.
Mm-hmm.
Come on. But I'm telling you, they do get conditioned, and what can you put off? What doesn't have to be done? And then what can you completely take off? What is completely unnecessary that's on your to-do list? Because we all have it, right? But take it off. Maybe do you have to go to the grocery store every day? No. Can you kind of go maybe twice a week and make it a lot easier? Yeah. Delete that daily grocery shopping off your list and just do it twice a week. So that is a big one. And then the C is just communication, which I think, again, B and C, like us super women, we think we have to do it all. And again, I say this from personal experience. This is why it was, in my opinion, this is what makes me a good clinician, is in, doing what I do, is because I have the certification, but I have the experience. I was that self-proclaimed superwoman.
Sure.
Yes, I got it. I can do it all. But guess what? At the end of the day, when you fall into bed, you're not getting a trophy. You might get some bragging rights, but you're not getting a trophy. Right. And my point is that your loved ones, your kids, they don't know what you need, right? They're not mind readers, number one. Number two, when you're doing it all and look like you got it all under control, they're like, hey, my wife, my mom, they're doing a great job. Kudos to you, mom. Keep doing it. Meanwhile, in your head, you're like, oh, I just wish somebody could help me.
Somebody would help me. Right.
Yeah. You just have to ask. There's so many women I talk to, they're like, they get so angry when their husbands come in and they plop on the couch on their phones. I'm like, did you ask them if they could do homework with the kids or come and make dinner so you can go and do a little something for yourself. Because that was the other thing that leads to burnout is like women have lost themselves.
Yes.
And when I talk self-care, I'm not talking manicures, pedicures. I'm talking like sitting and reading a book for 15 minutes, going and taking a bath, like going for a walk outside.
The things that feel like a luxury, especially for those with children and even without, depending on your mindset and your routine.
Yep.
Would I used to, women would call it a guilty pleasure. And I'm like, it shouldn't be guilty. It's a necessary, that's not, taking care of yourself is not something to feel guilty about.
Yep. So many women feel shame or guilt for taking 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Oh my gosh, 30 minutes themselves. I'd love for women to work up to 1 hour a day, but men, it's so funny. I actually had a conversation with someone recently and they're like, yeah, men take 3 hours of their morning ritual. Like we hardly get any because we're up at the floor taking care of the kids. Right.
Yeah.
So,
even say to women, especially women with daughters, but even, sons as well, what would you want for your children? Because we do get stuck into this do, and I have to do it all. And I can't take that time. And it's like, is that really what you want to be teaching your child? No, but it's okay for me. No, it's not.
Because they're watching you too. Like I never realized how much my kids watch. You don't. It's not what you say; it's what you do. They watch what you do.
Absolutely, and because this, but you become the better mother, the better partner, the better everything. Fill in the blank when you are prioritizing that.
Yeah. So it's not, shameful, or you shouldn't be guilt-ridden because you want to take a little time for yourself. And a walk outside, a little 30-minute exercise in the morning makes me so much of a better mom and wife and doctor, all of the things. Like I just show up better when I give a little bit to myself and don't, because so many women are resentful and angry and frustrated, all these emotions because they're just not communicating what they need. It's just as easy as saying, honey, can you do, and I've got my husband's very well conditioned now to say, and it's all about balance. Some weeks I'm doing a lot more than him because he's at the hospital all the time. And sometimes I was like, okay, it's all you this week or more you.
Right.
It's that perfect balance. But now he's really well conditioned to say, I have some time. What can I do? Or I'm, leaving for the hospital, but before I do, can I run to the store and get groceries? Or can I make dinner tonight? And I was like, or can I pick up the kids? And it's like, so now if I don't ask, he asks me and I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Great.
Well, and that is that sign of that communication. You said conditioning, but first before the conditioning, you need the communication, right?
Yeah. So. And there was a little learning curve and frustration there. I'm not going to lie, like even with my husband, I was like, okay, I have to keep asking, but after a while, he finally gets it.
For so many of us, it's so hard to ask to begin with because it's so not natural that then when we need conditioning after asking, it's like, well, wait a minute. Do you know what it took for me to even ask? Why aren't you doing it?
Yeah. And, it's just, it's, they just don't know. They can't read your mind. They don't know. And it looks like, you got it under control. So it's just knowing that, number one, even if you do have it under control, where can you just delegate a little more so you can get a little more relaxation? I think a lot of women just don't know how to relax, myself included. I have a hard time relaxing, but I force myself to because of role models, right? I want my kids to say, you can relax.
We have to, walk the talk.
Yeah.
So, but it really does. I love the ABCs because without the awareness, I mean, you lived it. There was no awareness. You didn't realize. And in hindsight, I imagine, because as I was listening to your story, it was, if it wasn't the fall off the horse, it would have been something else because you weren't aware. You were just running your body into the ground. And so I love that. So if you would give us the ABCs one more time, and then I want you to share with listeners one step that they can take. I mean, you gave them, if they could listen to this over and over and really make amazing progress by doing all of the things, working their way through the alphabet. But what would be one step that if they could just start today?
Oh, yep. So ABCs: awareness, boundaries, and communication. And the one thing I think, let's bring it back to the self-care, because I think I just need to hit that home of, you are worthy of having some time to yourself. And I think we go back to the whole mindset thing of, I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. I need to prove myself. Baloney. You proved yourself enough. And, in order to get your health on track and to feel better and to get a better mindset and all the things and better health, it's got to start with you. And that begins with a little you time, whatever that looks like for you. I would love your audience if they don't even know what it is anymore, because so many women don't even know what brings them joy, what makes them happy, what they want to do. Your homework is to figure that out and start doing it, 15 minutes a day, and communicate with your partner. Say, hey, I love taking a walk outside. Do you mind when you come home from work, if you can just hang with the kids so I can go out and get a little air, especially if you're little ones, you're just going to need to get out of the house at the end of the day just for some air, or going to take a bubble bath, or at night, can you put the kids to bed or do the bedtime reading if you have little ones? I think of all, like, even though my kids aren't little, all the little things that I remember doing. And it's like, I couldn't have my bedtime routine because and I loved it, but like, we didn't both have to do it, like one could have done it and then given the other one kind of the night off, so yeah, figuring out what it is that brings you joy will kind of help, obviously, relieve your stress, whatever you become aware of with your stressor, and start doing it. And obviously the C comes in there with communication, of telling your whoever is around it. Hopefully someone can help you. And if it's not a partner, maybe it's a mom, maybe it's a friend. Why do you talk about friends? Like,
I raised my kids alone for 20 years. And even without a partner, if because boundaries with the kids, it's not always boundaries with a partner. It's boundaries with everybody, friends, work people, life, yourself. And so if you go through those ABCs and create that awareness, I want to reiterate, because I want to make sure everybody heard you say, you are worthy, right? And that's the piece. And so one tip I give people, because unfortunately, like you said, so many people don't even know what brings them joy. So I'm going to give them a little tip so they can do your homework and figure out what that is. Often it's, what did you used to love to do? Right? Because it's so far fallen off your radar, you don't even remember. And I know I have so many people where some form of art or creative expression, they loved as a kid, or even as a younger adult, or maybe before they had kids. And so, drawing for 15 minutes a day, or any of so it doesn't have to be somebody else's list. Like, really take that time, listen to what Dr. Renee said. You are so worthy. You so deserve it. And I always say too, a better you is, the more you take care of yourself, the more you can take care of those that you love. Really.
Exactly.
And so, oh my gosh, so much gold. We could do this again. Hopefully we will do this again in the future. I am so appreciative of your time and your wisdom. And I know that your story and your tips are going to help so many of the listeners. For everybody listening, remember, you can get the show notes and transcripts by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time. I had a blast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.